Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thru FM. Today's going to be a little bit of a different episode. If you haven't noticed, it's been a little while since I've done a video or a podcast. So we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping here to kind of talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the website and the podcast and all that stuff in general. And then I've got some reviews of some games coming. I think I've got 6 games to talk about. And then kind of the end of the episode topic is I'm actually going to talk a little bit about some video games and stuff that I've been playing, which I don't normally do. I think I've done that once before on the channel years and years ago when I did my top 10 it was top 20 games, video games of all time back then. So I haven't really talked about video games, which is something that I frankly don't really do a lot, but I have recently in the last couple of months. And so let's just jump into it here. First, we'll do the housekeeping bit. So I announced on Facebook and Instagram and the BGG Guild and stuff like that. I haven't really made a formal announcement on here on the channel, but I don't have a website anymore. So I had the drivethrugvideos.com website. The reason for that is basically 3 reasons. The main reason is it was kind of a waste of money because nobody went to it really. So it was probably a little less than 10% of the views. So let's say something on my channel gets 1,000 views, maybe it would be a little less than 100 views on the website itself. So most people were not going to the website to, get new content. They either get it through probably Board Game Geek, at least according to the stats on YouTube. The majority of people get it, right on YouTube directly. And then, far, far down there in second place is Board Game Geek. And then, it's the rest of it is not even worth counting in a way. It's so little. So I liked having the website. It's a nice place to kind of have sort of a resume, almost kind of thing, like a body of work kind of idea. But unfortunately, the hosting company, which was HostGator.com, I don't mind mentioning them because they're a little bit irritating. They kind of tried to pull 2 fast ones on me. I had some site lock security stuff on there because of some security issues several years ago. So I had upgraded to that, and I had paid for 3 years of that, and they tried to cancel me. I still had another year left on it, and they said they weren't going to do that anymore. I had to rebuy something else, and they wouldn't honor the next year that I'd already paid for, which was the first strike. They gave you some song and dance about just format changes and platform changes and all that stuff, which still doesn't. I paid for 3 years of the thing, and you're not going to honor the next year. And then within a month or 2 after that, they said that I had to change my hosting plan. Basically they wouldn't grandfather me in or anything. So that was going to change as well. So it was all of a sudden something that wasn't really worth anything for me was trying to, add up extra money. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to do this. And so I tried to get on there and get some of the stuff off of it and all that stuff. And so basically everything's gone from the website, which is fine because all the videos and podcast episodes and everything like that, for the most part, is on the YouTube channel. Now, some of the older podcasts and stuff that I did back in the day with Marco and Lance and some of the other ones that were just audio, those are gone for good, unfortunately. Like Wooden Cubes and Iron Soldiers and all that stuff. So those are all gone, but that's fine. There was no way to kind of get all those files back off. And so the effect of that on the channel and then on the podcasting, all that nonsense, is the only way to really. I tried to do some kind of redirect thing with the feed burner, but that has been obsolete for a while. I went with feed burner. That's a very technical thing. I don't want to get into it, but that's basically a defunct way of kind of doing it. But YouTube has a thing where you can mark a playlist as a podcast, which I've done for the Thru FM podcast. Now, not all podcast players can, accept that playlist URL to listen to it in like a podcatcher or whatever app you might use. So because I did some playing with that and I was like, that sucks because unfortunately like it's just not, they don't like present it as an RSS feed. And there's a couple of tools out there that I looked at that can do it, but they're not very good. They don't. So there's nothing I could really like go and say, hey, use this tool to do it. It's basically your feed or whatever your pod app has to do it. I think Spotify works like that. You can go put the URL feed in there, or you can just listen to it on YouTube, and just stream it that way. So that, and that's how you 100% be listening to this episode because that's the only way it's coming out. So I'll have some descriptions and notes and stuff like that when I post this, of course. So, but this is where you're going to find the Drive-Thru FM stuff is just right on YouTube itself. And frankly, most people, that's how they listen to it anyway. If I look at the numbers that FeedBurner was giving me versus what the YouTube numbers were, just because I've been uploading them as videos, so to speak. And again, the YouTube numbers just kind of dwarf the actual RSS feed anyway. So anyway, that's kind of the deal with that. I just thought I would try to be as clear as possible about, what all happened there and everything. Because I did have a couple people reach out to me and says, oh no, website. And I saw, and the podcast is gone. And I was like, okay, not to worry. I did post on social media, but I just, wanted to post it, on YouTube, which is the main thing, right? So anyway, I just want to take care of all that stuff. So let's just take a quick little break, take a deep breath from all that, and then I'll jump into some game reviews. All right, welcome back, everybody. We'll jump into some reviews here. And not all of these are going to be negative. One of the other kind of like side effects recently is just the time to get and play board games with my group has just not been there. There's just been a lot of, life things. Work has been crazy for me the last month or so. And just kind of trying to line up play times and stuff like that with different folks has been tough. But I have got some games to play. I've been playing a lot of stuff on Board Game Arena and on apps, and so I'll talk a little bit about that on some of these games. So some of these games I'll mention which ones are like, I've only played this on Board Game Arena or whatever, and then I'll specifically talk about one app especially that I think is just amazing. But first let's talk about a physical game that I've been playing, the Plum Island Horror. This is a GMT game designed by Herman Lutman, who also did a relatively well-known game, Dawn of the Zeds, back in the day for Victory Point Games. This is very similar in some ways to Dawn of the Zeds. Plum Island Horror is very different for a GMT game, I'll tell you that much. It's kind of like a 50s or 40s, like oddball sci-fi tower defense game with lots of mutants and stuff. It's almost like a 70s game, like it's just got lots of interesting sort of villains and baddies that you're fighting against. Basically there's been sort of a chemical explosion or whatever on an island, and it's based loosely on some kind of like, kind of crackpot conspiracy, real events that may or may not have happened, I don't know, on a place called Plum Island. And basically, there's an encroaching horde of different mutated creatures. It's kind of like zombies, but they're a little bit more interesting in that. And there's like some very particular, individualized, named mutant, very, very, very specific mutants and stuff that you try to deal with. And you're just trying to like build up your resources and like go and rescue people and get them off of the island and then try to beat back the oncoming horde. And it's a co-op game, and I have played this 3 times now, and I really can't figure out how much I really like it, because it's actually relatively complex in the rule sense, although like your game turn is not very complex. I will say though, when you look at the board and all the cards and everything out there, it is very like fiddly on the eyes. There's just like a lot. It's very busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. Each player that plays will control like a different team. So you have like 4 or 5 different characters that you're going to be controlling. So there's like the island, police force. There's like a neighborhood watch, like just a gang of people in the neighborhood. There's like a group that belong to an athletic club, like a gym or something. Although, but it's not really like what you would expect. And so each of those different characters can do like different things. You do actions with those characters, and move around different spaces on the board. And there's like certain travel requirements in some cases, and then you kind of run in and combat, the different monsters and stuff like that. But there's just like a lot of stuff. So you do your turn, and then you'll draw some like fate cards, and that will spawn these different horrors, they call them. And you get these like stacks because everything's like chits. So you might have this giant stack of horrors that's kind of slowly moving down. You might have little stacks, and certain actions will make them kind of move faster or slower, and then you've got to interact with them, and then try not to take any kind of blowback damage from them. And you can do all kinds of stuff though in the game. You can get a chopper and like rescue people with it and fly them to like the hospital, or you can get like an attack chopper and all these different things. And then so these things are going to try to like basically come down the board and then like bleed out into the dock, right, the wharf, where everybody's trying to kind of escape and flee and rescue and get rescued. And then like all these individual buildings and stuff will have like slightly different little abilities, and there's little rules and stuff for all the different places and different characters. And then like like I said, the special monsters will spawn up. But the gameplay loops pretty easy. Just you move and do an action, and then you spawn stuff, and the stuff moves, and you got to deal with it. And there'll be like little barriers and stuff that you have to erect, or certain routes will get destroyed on the board. Sometimes you have to repair them and that kind of thing. But because it seems like each little piece in the game has like a rule or a different thing. And I mean, that's lots of games are like that, but it's just like, there's always like cool little things. So that's the kind of the stuff that I really like about it, is like pretty intricate that way. And it feels very like, lively and characterful and all that stuff. So it really kind of comes alive. But on the other side of that coin, it's like complex in a way. There's just like a lot going on, but like I said, the game loop's pretty simple, but it feels sort of like somehow artificially complex or artificially difficult, because once you can kind of sit there and sort of piece out the optimized strategy to do, the game is relatively easy. I have not lost any of the 3 games that I've played. It's kind of like it's almost like this sort of pseudo barrier that's there, and then once you kind of like can parse that a little bit, then it becomes pretty straightforward to win the game. So I kind of like, I'm not sure if I really like it, but I have seen, here's the hope for it, which I think is going to make me hang on to the game, is there is a expansion coming for it. And that is going to have some rules to increase the difficulty. Now, they've posted the rules for that online, but there's a lot of them. It's like, I don't even remember. It was like 20 or 30 different little rules, and you can just like pick and choose from. And I'm like, I mean, okay, I don't really want to have to decipher which are the right rules that are going to make my play experience, the best it can be. I'd like to have that kind of work done for me. So yeah, it's like it's fun though. Like it's cool. Like it's just, everything is quirky and funky, and like has that old like Tales of Horror, type of vibe from it, from like some of the old comic books way back in the day. So it's neat. But just in terms of like the gameplay side, it's just a little easy and probably maybe a little bit more complex than it should be for the level of difficulty or something. Like it just doesn't quite sync up exactly right. So I'll be interested to just kind of see how this game develops. Maybe the expansion will kind of quote unquote fix it, or if you can just have, because it's not terrible. Like it's a good time. Like I said, it's just a little bit easy and a little bit more complex than I think it should be for like the weight of the actual game. It's kind of like they made in the mechanical analysis isn't right, but they kind of like made a pandemic weight game, but with like lots of complexity. I don't know. I'm not sure if my words are serving me right, but if they can kind of lock in on kind of an advanced mode, a difficulty mode, and then add some cool new, randomized stuff to it, that would be cool. And that's the other thing about the game is cool, is like each time you play, it's going to be kind of different, because you're not going to see every single enemy every time you play it as well. So kind of a lukewarm recommendation, try before you buy type of idea there with Plum Island Horror. Now, the next game I'm going to talk about is Anunnaki, and this come out from Capstone Games. I've only played this one time. Really enjoyed the game. Really, really enjoyed it. My group, though, is like pretty lukewarm on this one. So everybody, not everybody in the group, but lots of people in the group have played it, or they played it with me that time. And everybody's like kind of, not sure how they feel about it. I played the one time. I really liked it. I haven't had a chance to sit down and play it solo. When we talk about video games later, you can be like, well, Joel's solo time is like gone into the floor because of his video gaming. But, for a while there, I was playing like lots of stuff. I'd play it with my group here and there. And then if it's got a solo mode or something, then I would do it. If you looked at like the last year or so, or probably a couple years of reviews, like a lot of those games that end up making it to the video, like have some mode. So, I can play it once or twice with my friends and then play it, a couple more times by myself to really get in the game. So I know it has a solo mode. I've read through the rules. The solo mode looks pretty good. I just haven't, for some reason, had the desire to play it solo. I think this is a competitive game, though. I don't know. I got to give the solo mode a shot. That's all I'm saying. But I really like this game. I really like the theme of the game. I like the mechanics. It's got this really cool, strange action selection mechanic where you like shuffle up all the tiles on your player board and then everybody copies, whoever shuffled them up. And so everybody has like each game is a different sort of configuration. And when you take an action, you like move along these routes to choose actions, but you don't have to move like adjacent from the action tile that you were on. You can jump to any one that you want. But if you do cross a line and go from this, point A to point B, which is next door across this route, then you get like a little bonus potentially. And as you kind of move around, you will start to encircle these other spaces that the action tiles are around, and those will give you other bonuses. So that's cool from like a mechanical perspective. It's very cool, very different. I really like that. Thematically, you're playing like these different pantheons of gods. So you've got like the Viking gods, and you've got the Greek gods, and you've got the Egyptian gods, and I can't remember what the other one is. But I thought they all seemed to play pretty well. Now, I played as the Egyptians. I think you play as Ra, and won the game. And I do feel like maybe that's the most powerful faction because I talked about the action selection mechanism, and when you move around certain ways, you'll put cubes out. Well, that gives you a way to kind of put extra cubes out, so it gives you like a little bit of an action bonus, so you get more actions, kind of. But that's basically all your special ability is, whereas some of the others are a little bit slower burn, where they won't start to kick in until midway through the game. So I think that in that particular play, that made a little bit of a bad taste in some folks' mouth, but I don't know. It wasn't like I blew everybody out of the water either. It was, it was a pretty close game. It was a 4-player game. First, second, and third were all pretty tight. Fourth was back a little bit. But I like the theme of it. So the theme of it, Anunnaki, is like the idea that it's out there in sort of, not I wouldn't say pop culture, but in like conspiracy culture or whatever, where that Earth was populated by some alien race. Like people always say, well, aliens built the pyramids, right, in Egypt or some other nonsense. And so that's the kind of the theme of the game, is that each of the 4 gods has their own planet. So like Ra has their planet, Odin has the planet, Zeus has a planet. And then they're trying to sort of do some stuff on their own planet. Each of the players has their own little planet board. But then there is Gaia, or Earth. And then you're trying to take over that territory as well. And then you have some fights there on that planet, either with each other or with kind of like like native peoples or whatever on the different spaces. And so, it's kind of like a 4X game. Some people I've seen call it that. It's not really, because there's no fog of war. You see where everything is, but you expand your territory and you take actions to, get resources out of the territory, and that kind of stuff. And there's like ways to sort of upgrade, because you start with your normal people, and then when you can kind of like upgrade them into like demigods, and then kind of bring your main god out, and those have special abilities, and those have like higher combat values and stuff. And so there's that kind of like dudes on a map kind of fighting stuff that happens, which is really simple and straightforward. And the other thing that you can do to like score points after you kind of expanded and conquered territories and that kind of thing is you have these like contracts, and this was the one part of the game that I was initially like, I don't really understand this, because it's like you got this board and you can take an action to take a contract, and then you can fulfill the contract, and I'm like, you are like a race of godlike beings. What is a contract? And it's kind of like, oh, it kind of makes sense, because once you take over Gaia or parts of Gaia, you want those people to sort of like you. Like, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, you want them to obey you and you are their ruler, but you also want to do things for them so they don't just outright hate you as like some, dictator god thing. And so I'm like, oh, that kind of makes some sense. And I thought that was kind of just a weird, interesting thing there. I'm like, oh, that's cool. You're going to do them some favors. You get some victory points or whatever bonus actions out of it. I don't know. I really liked it. It is a little weird, though, because the Anunnaki thing, I think, I'm trying to remember. I'm not really up to speed on this stuff, but I think it's like the whole like serpent people or something. No, that's not it. It comes from ancient like Mesopotamia or something. And so it's like those particular sets of gods, which nobody talks about anymore these days. But like the Greeks and the Viking gods, like that's not part of the Anunnaki lore in real life, even though that's not real life. You know what I'm saying? So like Greeks is not Anunnaki and Odin is not Anunnaki. But I kind of like that they do that, because they're just kind of having fun with that theme anyway, which is nonsense. I mean, Egypt, you could kind of argue, was kind of adjacent just because of the region. It's kind of next to the Middle East. It's Egypt's in Africa, but it's kind of right next to the Middle East. So yeah, I kind of like that, and I would like to see more factions. I don't have any of the expansions or anything. But to me, I had a really good time. I might do like a full-blown review of this if I can get some more plays in it. Maybe I'll try it solo and see how that works. It does look pretty interesting, the solo mode. So I'd like to get a couple more plays in it, though, but I'm not sure that'll happen because, like I said, my group's lukewarm. But so I wanted to at least mention it here, that my one play of it was a lot of fun, and it's not just because I won. I really did like everything in there. Okay, so that's Anunnaki. Next thing here is we will talk about one more physical game, and the rest will be like app stuff. So the next one is I finally got a chance to play Star Wars Rebellion with the expansion. And I almost called it the Rogue One expansion, but it's called Rise of the Empire. But it basically incorporates some of the storyline and characters from the Rogue One movie into the original trilogy, which is what the base game covered. And it adds some new ships and new units, and it adds some new cards that you'll sprinkle into the various decks, like the objectives and the projects like the Empire will do, and new cards and abilities for some of the matching characters. And mostly it changes up the combat system. So, long story short, did not like it. Do not like this expansion. I don't think that I ever want to play with it again. I thought it kind of muddies some of the decks down, especially for the Rebels. Now, you keep the same number of cards, but I thought some of the new objective cards and stuff were just kind of like... I mean, it's hard enough for the Rebels anyway, because I think not that they have a disadvantage. I don't think it's unbalanced. And to be fair, this game ended up being way closer than I thought it was going to be. But it was just... With the base game, you can kind of get one or two of those little objective points to get the propaganda, a couple of early scores. It's possible to do that. Whereas I felt with some of these they added in, it just made it a little bit more difficult on the Rebels. And maybe the Rebels have an advantage of the base game. I don't know. Because I've definitely played it where either side has won. It just kind of... it kind of comes down to a little bit of luck and deduction and that kind of thing. But that's part of the fun. So I didn't really like all that stuff. The new characters were like, okay. They're fine. It's cool to see... Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor and some other folks in there. That's cool to see them in there. I don't really need them though. Because I thought the narratives that could come out of the base game were cool enough, and you had so many weird, quirky moments that were just it works fine. You don't need that. The combat though, I actually disliked, and everybody at the table also disliked it, and that was on both sides. We played a 4-player game of it. We kind of prefer Rebellion as a 4-player game because it's really fun to kind of like sit there and commiserate with your counterpart to attack the other side and everything. 2 players fine, but to me it really excels at a 4-player game. And they made some changes to the combat because I guess a lot of people didn't like the combat in the base game. I never had a problem with the combat in the base game at all, not even a little bit. I thought it was great. It was quick. The game is not a dudes on the map game, really. I mean, it is. You can push around a bunch of miniatures, but the combat's not the focus of the game. It's about like sort of the cat and mouse sort of tactical gameplay with, putting out your different characters and activating different spaces and trying to sneak around the other player. And both players are trying to do that. And the Empire's doing it with a massive force of ships and fleets and everything. And the Rebels trying to do it at a kind of, unit disadvantage and a force disadvantage, but they have the advantage of being able to be hidden and, do little kind of guerrilla operations that, that big fleet that can't do anything about. Like they'll go and do like a little, sabotage mission and that kind of stuff. So the forces are asymmetrical, but they seem to balance each other out. And that's what the game is about. It's not about like fighting. It's not really the fighting part of it, because the Empire would just win in a straight up combat, because it's just like, we have 400 ships and you have 2. That's just how it works. And so in this one, instead of the combat being card driven in a way, because you have these leaders with numbers. So if you're fighting ground combat, you draw certain combat cards based on the space number, and then if you're doing space combat, you have space number, and ground, you have the ground number. So this allows you to draw extra cards, and you roll the dice, and then you play cards to kind of do the dice. And that was cool, because it's like back and forth. You don't know what to have, and you try to. The leaders matter in that case, because you want a good leader over there. Well, some of the good leaders, they have the good icons and stuff that will help with the different missions, the kind of the low level, more personal encounters instead of the larger scope, broad theater encounter. And so there's some good decision making there. And so, you put the leader out there, it generates a bunch of cards, maybe, and then you use those. And then you kind of manipulate the dice there. And when the new one, it's called cinematic for some reason, is each of you flips a card out of your like small hand of cards, and then once you use it, it's gone until you've gone through it or used an ability to get the card back in your hand. And then, it does a thing, and then you just roll the dice, and then there's some changes to the dice rolls that allow you to like block hits, which is annoying. I just really actively dislike this whole like, oh, well, I cancel all your hits because I rolled a bunch of swords, whatever the thing is. And it's like, okay, nothing happened. This is not cinematic. Nobody lost any units. And then the number on the leaders, instead of like drawing these combat cards, it's just rerolls. This is rerolls on the dice. So you just reroll stuff, and okay, there's nothing cinematic about this at all. Like, I like roll a bunch of dice. That's a ton of hits, both usually back and forth if you roll good, and then you get some dice to manipulate the stuff. And the leader choice matters, because getting rerolls is like, don't people get so married to rerolls all the time. It's like, no, you rerolled it. No, I rerolled the same thing. Great. That's not the end all be all of it. And so we just actively dislike this combat. And like I said, the rest of it seems to just kind of water the experience down a little bit. So I know everybody's, I don't think I'm out on a limb, because everyone in my group was like, wow, that was super disappointing. What's going on with this expansion? This is terrible. And yeah, I just, I know I'm sorry I have it, because you have the kind of whatever. I mean, you have like the inclination like, oh, I've got it in the box, I should play with it. Like, I'm not. I might just get rid of the damn thing. It was that bad. We just did not like it whatsoever. All right, so that's Star Wars Rebellion Rise of the Empire expansion. And now let's talk about some games I've been playing on the apps. First, I'll start with a negative one. This is the new game from Uwe Rosenberg called Applejack. I think this is like nominated for Spiel des Jahres or something. I can't remember. It got nominated for something. And man, this game is boring. You draw tiles and put out tiles on your board, and like try to connect different colored apples with each other. And then you also get honey. And so the honey is points, but you also use it to spend when you connect these apple tree tiles. And sometimes when you connect them in a certain way, you can kind of generate bonus honey. And then you have other like objectives around the side of the board. And then basically it's like this, it's sort of like the choosing in Nova Luna or in Patchwork in a way. There's not really any kind of like Tetris thing. They're like hexagon tiles. And so it's kind of like a weird version of Nova Luna, which is a really fun game. I like Nova Luna quite a bit. But Applejack is like a more watered down, it's much simpler version. But yeah, it's just very like, man. And then the other thing is there is these what is it? Cherry trees? No, they're not cherry trees. Sorry, I had to look it up. It's a blossom. So you get like these flower blossoms. So you can kind of like try to score, you know, those because you basically will score your interconnected groups of the different colored apples when the scoring round happens, and then also like you can have a larger group of these blossoms that kind of goes throughout your apples. So you're trying to score them kind of concentrically in a way, but it is just pretty straightforward. Like this is probably a really good family game, but I think it kind of would wear itself out really, really quickly. I think so. So to me, it's just a very inferior version of Nova Luna and even Patchwork, kind of, not really, but more Nova Luna. And it looks pretty. I guess it's green and colorful and all that stuff, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why this had to exist. It's fine, It's one of those where it's like, yeah, they could play this with kids or whatever, but there's better games out there that would do the same thing as well. And this is going to be very short. I've basically described you the game. You pick a tile from the one that your piece is adjacent to or on, and then you add it, and then you go, oh, which is the one that's going to cost me the least honey or give me the most honey back, and also continue my little area of red or green or orange apples that I am building, and that's it. And then you score it and you get some honey, and there you go. That's the game. So anyway, the only reason I bring it up is because I think it was nominated for something, and my group was like, "Oh, look, it's on Board Game Arena. Let's try it." And then I was like, "Oh, wow, this is not even interesting." So anyway, that is Applejack. Now this game is about a year old. It's called Splendor Duel, and I am absolutely in love with this game. To me, it's way, way, way better than even the original Splendor, which I did enjoy, and I probably would still enjoy it if I played it now. But Splendor Duel, holy cow, this game is lots of fun. If you've not heard of Splendor, it's the game where you collect gems and you get cards, and the cards allow you to buy gems cheaper, and you just kind of race to, was it 15 points? This has a similar thing. This one, I feel like I've only played it on a Board Game Arena, but I've played it quite a bit. And we've actually run some tournaments, which is something you can do on Board Game Arena with the local group here, and had a lot of fun playing those tournaments. And it is just a really cool, crunchy game because the way you pick the gems is neat because it's like this grid, and you can only pick gems like in a straight line. And it has this new gem type, which is like a pearl, which is you need as a special one. It's a very individualized one. It still has the gold gems, which are wild, but some of the better cards that you get require a pearl. And I think there's only 2 pearls in the whole like bag of gems. So getting at those becomes like an interesting part of the game, and trying to like corner the market on those, so to speak, for a little while. And then you have these like favor actions that you can do. So if you are the one, so as you pull the gems off this grid, there's a lot less gems to choose from. So you might have to take an action at the start of your turn to refill that grid from the bag. When you do, your opponent gets a favor, which they can use to just like basically take a gem for free. And that's a big advantage because, you get a free gem, then maybe instead of on your turn taking gems, you can take the free gem, and then you can buy a card basically. And then the cards have this interesting thing where they have, instead of just points on them or just like free gems, they have these like little crowns. And once you get to 3 crowns, you can take one of I think they were called merchants in the original, and you get those. And those give you abilities like, taking a turn again, or stealing one of the favor tokens, or, one is just worth a little bit more points. And there are other cards too that have those things too. Or like when you take a card, you can take a gem that matches the color of the card you just bought. So there's other special abilities and stuff on the cards. Yeah, and you can still like reserve a card, and the card row is pretty much the same. We've got the level 1, 2s, and 3s. But the way that you win the game is not just points. So you get to, 20 points, and then you just win the game. Or if you have 10 points in a particular color. So, you have black, red, black, red, green, blue, and white cards. And if you have 10 points like in one color, so I've got a bunch of the black gems, but I've got 10 total points in those cards, then that's a way to win. And then the other way to win is you have a certain number of the crowns, because like I said, once you get 3 crowns, you can get a merchant, and then if you get another 3 crowns, you can get the other merchant. So yeah, it's really cool. There's lots of ways you got to watch what people are doing. You know, you're like, oh, I'm beating them. It's like 15-6, or let's say 15-8, more realistic. But they have 8 points all in black. You know, so you're 5 points away. They're really 2 points away. They need a very specific 2 points. But yeah, so it's really, 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 really fun. I cannot recommend it enough. It's great on BGA. I don't play a lot of like 2-player games in person, so you know I want to pick it up and just to do a video on it. You know, basically, because I really like this game. I think everybody's really liked it. I remember some buzz when it came out, but I'll just add to that because I think it is really a fantastic game. Really, really amazing. I can't recommend it enough. So that is Splendor Duel. And then finally, the last game that I'm going to talk about here, and this is not a board game arena game, but it's on Steam, it's on iPhone, it's on Android. This is the Dune Imperium app. And I know I've talked a ton about Dune Imperium. Everybody knows about Dune Imperium. But I want to say the app is phenomenal. The app is fantastic. It's just the original base game. There's no expansions. There's no uprising. You can play it online. It is cross-platform. Like I have it on Steam. I've been playing with my friends. They're on iPhone and Android and stuff like that. You can play it async, which is nice. The only thing that kind of sucks about it is there's not really a good way in Steam to have a notification. Like it will pop up a notification, but if you don't see it at that moment, then there's no like little icon or something to let you know you have a turn. So we just been taken to Discord to message me when it's my turn, because everybody else is using it on a phone and they have the little dot or whatever. That's the only thing that sucks about that, but works really well. I mean, it looks basically like the board game. There's some graphical, enhancements, but I'm one of those that doesn't like a ton of graphics, so like little miniature figures and other random 3D effects. Like I want the board. I want to see the board and the pieces. That's all. I just want to be able to play it online or, on digital. And it's pretty much like that. It has some, flourishments, but not too many. So it works great that way. The music in the game is like the damn music from the movies. And it's just great. So when it's my turn and I'm sitting there looking and the mood of the music is just building, I'm like, I better make the right call here because this is way more dramatic than it should be. The music is fantastic. Like I'll just leave the damn app on for a minute and just like, yeah, this music's great. Now that's the multiplayer experience, and you can play like simultaneous, so everybody's on at the same time too. But the single player stuff, and even like kind of the pickup game idea where you're playing against strangers or whatever, that's pretty cool because it has all of these different like rule tweaks that it'll throw at the game. So it'll do stuff like, I'll say something like, you have to win a game without going to any green spaces, with the green symbol, right? Or something like that. Or you've got to win and you've got to have, I'm making stuff up off the top of my head right now, but you can't have an alliance or whatever with any faction. Stuff like that. So it has all these weird things in there, which really awesome. Like I've played this game a ton and, in real life and on digital. And it's just cool to have those like little wrinkles thrown at you. And I kind of wish that they would just do like a little run or something of like a deck of cards where you could do that. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 decks where it's like, okay, this deck of cards changes like the placement rule, and then this deck changes the win condition, and then this deck will change some other thing. So you flip like one card out of each deck, and it would kind of like make an amalgamation of some of these rules that are in the app online. I don't know. I think that'd be pretty fun. It just, it just kind of spiced the game up in different ways. Although the physical game has the advantage of having the expansions, which kind of does that anyway. And I'd be looking forward to the expansions on the digital. But man, I cannot recommend the app enough. Just if you want to play online multiplayer, async, whatever, that's there. It works really well. And then like kind of the single player, or you can do like, it has like seasons or something. There's like events and tournaments and stuff. So you're playing with these just weird rules. And that's just really cool. I mean, that's awesome. It just really, really works with this game. And it just adds kind of a new freshness to kind of the general game overall, that exists as a whole in the world, the board game in the real world and the digital game. So it does add something fresh to the game's existence, because it's cool because like, you can still have the real game and play that, but then when you want that little tweak of something different, you can jump on the app and play like a little random variant of it. That's just really cool. I really, really like that. So that's the Dune Imperium app. Really just can't recommend it enough. And it's got a pretty good tutorial. I think I kind of just walked through it. I mean, I know how to play the game, but I just kind of played with that. And I'm like, yeah, if you've never played it, this would help suffice. And you could just play against, some easy AI, get the hang of it, and then, start to work your way up and stuff. So anyway, that's Dune Imperium app. Definitely recommend it. So let's just take a break here, and then I will come back and talk about some video games, mostly RPGs. Okay, so we're back from the break, and so we're going to do something a little bit different here. And I do have kind of a board game, tabletop-y approach to some of what I'm going to talk about, mostly for one series of games that I'm going to talk about. But I just want to kind of explain a little bit about like why I'm even bringing this up. So to get started, I'm just going to talk very briefly about like a little rabbit hole I got into. So my top 20 video games of all time, my number one game was Ultima Online. My number two was Fallout 3, which if you haven't watched the new Fallout show on Amazon, it's awesome. Really, really cool. And I do recommend Fallout 3. That's probably my favorite of all the Fallout games. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Fallout, though. So my number one game was Ultima Online. And so that game is largely, it still exists. I mean, the official servers are still around. They are god-awful compared to what they were. It's terrible. It's run by a company that is like 3 people or something. It's just, they don't have the resources, and I don't think they do a very good job of maintaining that game. There is a online community of various different free servers because there was a loophole back when Ultima Online first came out in the late 90s that in the DCMA, I don't know all the details, I'm not a lawyer, but there's a lot of free servers out there that are in no danger of getting shut down so far, and there's one big one called Outlands, which is amazing, and it's like I've been playing that since like late mid-COVID times, just because I don't know. I tried like playing the WoW vanilla and Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy 14, which is an online MMO and stuff. I don't know. As COVID came, and I was like, oh, I'll play an MMO. I didn't really stick with any of those, and I heard about this Outlands thing, which is, it's almost like they took a lot of the modern video game design, quality of life concepts and reapplied it to Ultima Online, but it still is Ultima Online in a lot of ways. It's really fantastic. I mean, it's hard for me to recommend it because I think it's a very peculiar sort of niche taste. You got to like getting murdered every 10 seconds some days. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, but it's like kind of a cutthroat world. But I got into that, and that's really cool. I haven't played that for a couple of months now because I think I just burned out on it. But I mean, they've had expansions and all kinds of stuff. It's really cool. But in that kind of rabbit hole of all of these Ultima Online free server things, there's a couple other good ones, decent ones. Nothing as good as Outlands. But there is one called Ruins and Riches, which basically kind of amalgamates the original Ultima games, Ultima 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's parts of like 6 in there and stuff. I don't really remember 7 or 8. I never played those. But it basically uses the Ultima Online engine as a single-player game, although there is a version of this where you can go and there's a server called Ultima Online Adventures, UO Adventures, where you can play it. So think of it like Skyrim, but in the Ultima sense, because you get your character, you run around like you in the isometric Ultima Online view, And Ultima has always been, or Ultima Online has always been like Skyrim in the sense that you gain skills by doing them. So if you want to like gain your sword skill, you go swing the sword a whole bunch, and then your skill goes up. You don't like get levels and then all of a sudden all your stats go up. Or if you want to go mine ore, your mining skill will go up, and that kind of stuff. And so they take that same engine, drop it into like a single player world, which is just massive. And then you run around and can do whatever you want in the game. It's very, very like a sandbox game, which is what the Ultima Online games were. They weren't like, people use this word disparagingly. They weren't like the theme park ride that is, World of Warcraft, where it's like, you're in this zone for the next 4 levels. And when you get to the end of that, you're going to fight in this dungeon for like 2 levels. And then you're going to go to the next zone. And then when you get to the end, you're going to go to this raid. And then you're going to do that. And then you're going to get the gear. And you're going to progress. So it's like, there's an obvious progression chain there. Whereas Ultima Online World and Skyrim, to some extent, can just be like, hey, go do whatever you want. You can go be a merchant and go kill dragons or go do whatever. Or in the online world, go steal from people and become a jerk and form a guild and fight over territory and whatever. So anyway, this Ruins and Riches thing is like a single player version of that. So I was kind of getting into that because I tried going back and like getting some of the older Ultima games and like playing those, and I'm like, these just yeah, the quality of life stuff is just like, I can't deal with this. I'm not going to waste my time. And the ones that I really played from my childhood was 3, 4, and 5. And 4 is obviously kind of like the one that everybody talks about. And even that one, I just couldn't find like a good... There's some mods and stuff that, supposedly add quality of life issues, but I'm like, I don't know. I'd rather just go Dragon Quest or something, instead of fooling with this. But, playing the Ruins and Riches stuff, it's like playing those games, but with a much more modern engine, and I lost myself in that. I got 2 characters I made there. Like one, I haven't really like beat it because there is a way to kind of beat it where you can kind of memorialize yourself in a way. I almost don't want to say anything because the community there is really great. There's like a good Discord on it, and so people are very sensitive about spoilers because there's a lot of like weird, crazy stuff. Which, if you know the early Ultima games, there's a lot of weird, crazy stuff that happens. Like, you'd be doing a fantasy adventure, and then, like, I'm on a space shuttle. Yeah, I think that was in the first one. So, anyway, there's a lot of crazy stuff like that, and there's a lot of, like, kind of throwbacky little pop culture references mixed throughout the Ruins and Riches mod and stuff that I don't want to spoil. But I basically got myself, like, an island. I own my own island with the one character. And then the second character, I haven't gotten quite that far. But, like, the amount of stuff you can do in here, honest to God, it blows away, like, even, like, Skyrim. Because you can go you can get a boat, you can go pirate, you can go treasure hunt, you can go dig up, like, find these SOS bottles, and that'll give you, like, a coordinate in the ocean to go dig up, and, like, maybe a kraken comes up or some other creature, and you fish up a bunch of treasure. Or you can go, like, explore, like, some pretty significantly sized dungeons if you want, and go to these weird, like, mirror worlds and all this kinds of stuff. It's just amazing. So when I say, like, I haven't really beat the game with my second guy, it's like, well, I've done a lot of other stuff. So it's just kind of, like, fun to play around and stuff like that. Anyway, so that kind of, that whole thing of me, like, going and playing my favorite game of all time, Ultima Online, in the kind of the new incarnation, which is Outlands, led to these other shards, which led to Ruins and Riches. Because I wanted to try, playing some old school RPGs and stuff. And then Ruins and Riches kind of filled that up. And then, come to the kind of almost the point of the story is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out. And I played Remake back in the day. And I did not enjoy it. I really didn't like it because it basically So the Rebirth remake stuff, they're redoing Final Fantasy VII, which came out in the late 90s, into 3 games. So they basically chopped the story up into 3 parts. And I think the problem is that Remake, which is the first part, is like the dumbest part of the game. And then the game doesn't start getting good until where Rebirth happens. So I remember playing the other one, and then some review or something I saw didn't like Rebirth either. But it seems like most people like Rebirth because it has like some of the open world stuff, so the world opens up, and you can go explore and stuff like that, which is kind of what I like to do. But I kind of started thinking to myself, I was like, yeah, I don't really, you know what, I don't really like Final Fantasy games, and why is that? Because they're really loved. And I think I had Final Fantasy 6 or 9 on my top 20. I think it must have been 6. Because I really enjoyed Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 4, 6, and 9. 7, I actually don't really like. I thought that thing way overstayed its welcome. And I really could not get into like the protagonist characters, emo, flashback stuff. I don't want to spoil any parts of the story. But that was very, very tedious on 7. And I thought 6 kind of told a similarly scoped story, but in a better way. Obviously, the graphics were completely different. But after 9, 10 I didn't like. 11's an MMO. I haven't tried 12. That's on my wish list. 13 I didn't like. 14's an MMO. 14 I really like the MMO. 15 I didn't like. And then 16 had come out last year. That looks pretty cool, but I was like, I don't like any. What's the deal? Why do people like these Final Fantasy games? So I was getting into kind of like watching a lot of YouTube content about stuff because I was like, this can't just be the pinnacle of JRPGs, or RPGs even, whatever on video games. And I found a lot of people that kind of jived with what I was saying. Like a lot of people are really fond of 6 and 9, and a lot of people are really fond of 7. That's fine. There's a lot of cool stuff in 7, but I don't know. 6 and 9 are just way better. But a lot of people really like 10. I don't think 10 is a good game at all. So anyway, this is not a Final Fantasy discussion, although I'll get back to it at the end of this. So I started rabbit holing on this JRPG YouTube community. And I found some good channels that I've subscribed to now. I'm like, oh, there's a whole world out here that I didn't know existed. And so I found one game called Ys, which is YS, Ys. And I had played, I think it was the original way back when on the PlayStation or something. That wasn't the original. It was like a remake of the original. The original came out in the late 80s on PC only. And Ys is like an action RPG. So sort of Zelda-like. But it's more on the RPG side because you actually like level up. Like in Zelda, you don't level. You just fight and then you get some item that helps you fix a puzzle in some other part of this dungeon or other part of the world, right? So you kind of bounce around and you get better gear and you get newer trinkets to unlock clues and puzzles. But the action combat of Ys is sort of similar to a Zelda thing. Like it's kind of Zelda adjacent. And I'd played it and I really enjoyed this Ys game. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot that Ys was a thing. And so I started deep diving on Ys, which is made by this company called Falcom, which again made these games in the late 80s. They started in the early 80s with some of these other games that I've never heard of. It's like Xanadu and what's the other one called? I don't remember. But some other games that were basically the precursors to Zelda and even like Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, I should say. And so I'm like, these guys are like the OG Japanese role-playing game, video game company from back in the day. And they're still around and they're still like small, they're not like a big company. So they're like this indie company that's been around since the 80s. So I started playing. So so right now I have played through all of the Ys games except for 9, which I'm in the middle of right now. And it's pretty interesting. This isn't really about Ys, but I just want to get to where I'm going. If you like an action RPG, I think it's really good. The old ones had like this weird bump combat thing, which I like actually. And then they changed the engine to like a sort of I don't know how to explain it. It's like a top-down isometric action combat thing. Like I'd say it's Diablo style, but it looks nothing like Diablo. It's very, anime style. And that's cool. And then now the later ones are like these big, 3D, you can move the camera around, full motion action combat stuff. So it has like this whole genre. So I basically went through and replayed through whatever the one was I played back in the day, but I started from this one called Origins, then played Ys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then now I'm on 9. But they've remade some of those, like Ys 3 was called Wanders from Ys on the Super Nintendo, and now it's called Oath of Felghana, and it's redone in this completely new engine and all that stuff. So I went through and replayed all these, and I'm like, these are great. This is perfect, because The Zelda games are okay. Like, I like them. They're all right. But sometimes I like to just play the game. And so with the East games, this will make sense. Like, I just want to go through a zone or an area of the world and just go fight stuff. And doing so is good because that levels you up. And you can, like, level up your different weapon types sometimes, depending on the East game. Or you just get levels and experience and you get stronger. And where Zelda, like, if you did that, it would just be like, well, you did that. You got nothing to show for it. It just, stuff gets in the way for you finding the boomerang or the special flame or the special arrow to unlock the clue. So I like to just go in and, like, people call it grinding, but I hesitate to call it grinding here because I never did it for that long. I mean, in some of the later, longer East games, I maybe grinded for 2 hours total out of, like, the 40 hours of gameplay. And that was just me like, you know what, I'm going to take the long way to this other destination just so I can go fight some stuff and get better, like, mechanically with, my fingers and my hands in terms of the combat, right? So I was like, this will make me improve my skills as in the game terms, and also me physically, getting the timing down of, like, jumping and blocking and stuff. So, got through all that stuff, and I found out, and it's the other part I wanted to talk about with the East stuff that I really like is you almost always play the same guy. His name is Adol, Adol, and it's kind of like Link, right? You're kind of playing the same character. But in these, it's the same guy. Like, the different Link or, Zelda games are not in the same universe. They're just, like, different riffs on the same idea. The East games are the same universe. They will reference each other. Although there's not really, if you play East 2 and then East 3 and then East 4, the story itself doesn't, like, necessarily go in a linear order. Like, East 9, the one I'm playing now, is the latest in the timeline. When East 10 comes out in the fall, where it takes place in the timeline is all the way back, like, I think right after East 2. It's between East 2 and 3. So they kind of just jump around, but they kind of reference each other a little bit. But there's not, like, a play order or anything you have to really do to understand the story. And I just played it through them in number order. So Origins 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But yeah, so anyway, I got down in that rabbit hole. I'm on East 9. I've enjoyed every single one of the East games. I will say this. I'm not sure about 9 yet. It's getting there. It has a weird sort of plot thing going on. I'm not sure what's happening here. I kind of don't like it. I mean, it looks the best out of all of them, graphics wise, I guess. 8, I think the engine in 9 is better, but the actual artwork in 8 is way better. Anyway, so that's that. So that got me on this road of this next game, which I want to talk about. And this is the Legend of Heroes series, but it's broken up into many little series. And this is also done by Falcom. Now, they had a couple of Legend of Heroes series way back in the day that are long defunct. But in the early 2000s, they started a series called Trails in the Sky, which is a trilogy. Now, I've played the first 2 games of Trails in the Sky, and I'm on the third one. I just started the third one. But what happens there, so you have that trilogy, and then there is 2 more games. There's Trails from Zero and Trails of Azure, something like that. And so that's like its own series. And then there's a 4-part Trails of Cold Steel series. And then there's a Trails of Reverie, which is like an epilogue. So think of that like a 5-part series. And then there's Trails Through Daybreak coming out later this year, which starts another series. But all of these Trails games are one big story. And from what I understand, and please don't post any spoilers in the comments or I'll be very upset. What I understand is that characters from, some of the old series will sometimes show up in the later ones. So it's kind of like, it is one story, and it is like chronological, and you probably should play it starting with Trails in the Sky. But I've seen online where people kind of, they talk about that in a few different ways. Now, I will say the older games, I haven't gotten to any newer ones, but the older ones are like, you can see they're of their time, but they're really cool. But it's really fascinating to me to see this thing that's like, it's at, 10 games now? And I think it's supposed to go to 18 games or something. There's speculation on that. But it's like the same story. It's not all the same characters. I think that's why they break it up into there's a trilogy, a duology, a 5-part series, and then I think another trilogy coming. So the other characters might show up, but you're playing fresh characters each time they kind of not reboot, but like restamp the timeline. That's crazy. It's pretty cool. And having played the first two Trails in the Sky games, to me, this is like, I'm like, okay, this is something I kind of need to tell people about, because they're not like that popular, really. I mean, I think I never heard of these things. Now, they just came over like in the last like couple of years. The newer ones that have been coming out here, over in the US, I mean, because it's a Japanese, company, and they put the games out in Japanese, and then there's some localization and translation stuff that takes time, and sometimes it'll take a year or two for them to come over, and sometimes it took several years, but now they seem to have kind of a head of steam. Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to just share this with you guys and whoever cares, because there's a lot of interesting things about this game so far, and I'm not going to spoil anything, because I think there can be massive spoilers for this, and I've really avoided so successfully so far, like knowing anything about what happens in the later games. Like I said, I've only done the first two, but a couple of things that I like. One is, it's not one of these where, you know how like in Final Fantasy 1, this isn't a spoiler, like it's just 4 heroes and then you're chosen and then you're fighting like the Doom demon of chaos at the end, and like a lot of RPGs, JRPGs especially, but also even regular RPGs, is like, oh, the sorcerer who, is in touch with the evil demon force that wants to rip the universe in two is what you're fighting, which is so tiresome. I mean, do you have to fight God at the end of every game? Like, that's annoying. Just, take it easy. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell me, can't you just tell? I know it's a video game, okay? But it's like, have some respect for yourself. You know what I mean? I don't know. Because there has been some other games that I've played recently that I'm not going to bore you with or talk about. And I'm like, oh, look, we're fighting God again. Oh, boy. So this game doesn't really have that, at least yet. Maybe like, in game 6, it's like, okay, now we're going to get to the nutty oddball stuff. But it's like the story is very grounded, I mean, it's all super tech, kind of like a weird steampunk with like the magic of Final Fantasy VII kind of idea, because you get these special like orb crystals, which are like technology that you can like, they make computers with them. You can sort of like cast magic with it, and they can make airships and, tanks and weapons and stuff out of these orbs. So that's like the magic in the world, is this special technology, which is kind of Final Fantasy VII-esque. So you have that part of it. But like the storytelling is very, I don't want to oversell it, because I wouldn't say it would make good for like good TV. But in terms of like video game stuff, I'm like, man, is this a tier? Well, what is this? What's happening here? When I got to the end of like the second game, especially, I was like, what the hell? What is this is a video game, dude. Like, but it's like, man, there's like all these moments and stuff, because it's like a small band of characters that you kind of end up with, like 6 or 7 characters, by the end of the second game. And there is some of that like relationship stuff in there, which has kind of become more popular in gaming, in the video game world. But it's not stupid. Like, it's not like, oh, you're trying to like get the alien to bang you, you know what I mean? Like in Mass Effect or something. Like, it's just relationship stuff, and like, some of it's corny, some of it's cheesy. And, but it's like, oh, that's nice. That's sweet. Okay, look at these two, or whatever the situation. And it's not just like the main characters, it's like the side characters, and there's some humor in there and all that stuff. It's cool. I don't know. Like, again, I'm not trying to oversell it, because some of it's corny as hell, but it's still like, it's fun. Okay, it's a video game. Okay, so there's there's that angle of it, and that kind of like evolving, like plots within plots. Because like I said, I'm only 2 games in, so I don't know where this thing's going with like whatever the big bad ends up being, down the road. I'm sure there'll be like a recycle of that, where it's like, okay, we took care of that villain, and they'll probably come up with a new one or something. But so you got that angle part of it, the storytelling, and then you also have the mechanics, right, of the combat and all that stuff, and the questing. the main thing I want to talk about is combat stuff, because it's very board gamey. Well, not even board gamey, but very like tabletop, right? Tabletop skirmish game. Because, and the kind of the reason I brought up East before is because I like a good action game. I like to, kind of keep the stimulus pumping, right? Keep me jumping, keep me flowing. I like that stuff. I like a good turn-based game, though, because I like some tactical stuff and some strategies. I played through some of the old Final Fantasy remasters. Those are a little tedious, but they're pretty fun. And, you got some, like, juggling of, like, who to attack, what kind of types to attack, and stuff like that with those Final Fantasy games. And then you also have, like, your tactical RPG. Think of, like, a Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics, those kind of games. Now, I have not played Final Fantasy Tactics. Everybody says I should play that. I played some other of these tactical RPGs. And those are, like, okay, but they're like a little too much, like a little too much going on. Like, you're juggling like all of these different variables and job types and elemental types and everything. And then like the terrain is often like very like just, I'm like, man, you just tried to make a huge puzzle out of this simple, like this combat should take 10 seconds in real time, but it's like a massive puzzle. And maybe I just haven't found the right tactical RPG to play. But here's the thing. With the Trails stuff, and I think this carries all the way through all the games, not just this trilogy, from what I can see. They just kind of, they tweak it around the edges. It's like a blend of a turn-based, straightforward, let's call it old school Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or, whatever tropey analogy you want. Turn-based, attack, use a magic skill, use an ability, special ability, that kind of thing. But it has like a positional thing, like a very light positional thing, because proximity matters in this. But it's not to the point of like a Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics, where it's like this big convoluted sort of puzzle piece thing. It's just very skirmish-like, and you have some cool different things. So you have, in this game, the magic is called arts, and then the special ability is called crafts. So you have like arts and crafts. And that's all based on, again, on that orb technology. So when you do it in art, it's like a different kind of aspect of the orb. And then you have the craft, which is like your special skills that has mostly to do with like your combat style. Or some of them are kind of magical, though, so it's a little bit of a fuzziness there. And what happens is, you have like your mana. I can't remember, it's called EP, like your energy something. And so when you cast an art or cast a spell, that's a cost that. So you have that ability. And you get potions and stuff. And then you have the crafts. So every time you like take damage or do damage, you have this counter that goes up. I think they're called CP. I don't know what the actual craft points. I don't know. They're called CP. And so you build up. And so as those build up, then you can execute special abilities. So it's almost like the limit break idea in some of the Final Fantasy games. But as you get hit or make normal hits or hit with a spell, you build up. And then you can spend those points as you get them to do different cool special abilities. But once it builds up to 100, then you can do like what's called an S break, like a big old like cool animation combat thing that does a ton of damage or heals like everybody in the party, depending on the character. So when you get to 100, you can do that. You can even let it build up to 200, so you can do an even cooler one. So it's kind of a risk there. The cool thing about that, though, is that number carries over from fight to fight. It doesn't reset to 0 at the beginning of the fight. So if you're in a dungeon or whatever, like a place, and you're going through combat, and you're building up, and then you go, okay, I'm going to kind of try to go into this boss fight with like, my CP already built up. So then you can spend those specials. The cool thing is once you hit 100 or 200 to trigger those big S breaks, you can hit that like mid action of anybody, like of one of your characters or one of the enemy characters. And then once that action is resolved, you are going to go next in the turn order, because the turn order, this is very much like Blackstone Fortress, or I can't remember what the other game is. There's another board game like this where the turn order of all the combatants gets shuffled up, or like the Star Wars skirmish game that does that. There's some other skirmish games that do that. So the turn order's kind of shuffled up, but sort of, because it's a video game, it kind of takes into some other consideration the calculations. So for example, like if I just move, because like I said, there's spacing. So if I just move, but I can't move close enough to hit you, because everybody has like a movement stat. So I just move, but that means I'm going to get like preference on the next sort of round of combat. And you can get other like those orb pieces that increase your speed, increase your move. So your reaction time is going to be, a little bit better. So you get a chance. Like I had at the end of the second game, I had a guy that was going like twice in a row, but then it would like, he'd be on cooldown for a little bit. So you play with that a little bit. And so you move and then like, okay, you get a preference. Or if like, say you just use an item, like the cooldown of your actual action is not as much as somebody that was casting a spell. Like when you cast a spell or an art, if it's like a little quick self heal, then you'll cast it and then it will happen in the next position on the turn order, and then you'll go to the bottom. But if you're doing like a big effect, you'll cast it, but then maybe some monsters get a chance to act in between, and then they sometimes will do an interrupt type of thing. Certain abilities will interrupt, your casting and stuff. And so that might just cancel it. So if you're doing a big one, you have to kind of time it right. So you see where I'm kind of going with this, right? Like it's a little bit involved with this, but it's not, in my opinion, not too involved, but it feels I'm like, man, this is cool. Cause it's like a board game, but it does that next step with the video game, kind of crunching some of those calculuses where like, okay, they just moved, they just used an item. So we're going to give them like a little 20% speed boost on the next sort of quote unquote round of combat and stuff. And I'm sure like if I were explaining this, the code that I'm explaining is not matching 100%. Like it's all just kind of underneath the covers. But getting back to those special S breaks, you can hit that button and you'll jump to the top of the line, so to speak. And then, so that becomes a really fun thing to play with, like timing that. Cause you're like, you can see the next, several down the turn order, and you can go in and jump and hit that and be like, okay, I'm going to take some, cause like I had this gal in the second game, especially where you could just massive heal and like defense boost, and it'll like remove every bad status. So if you were like poisoned or blinded or something, it would just remove all that. And you can see like, I'm going to wait to use that because I know when that like, the boss is going to do that special thing that's just so nasty. So I can pop that, and then I'll be able to kind of absorb that, take that hit, that kind of thing. So it's really, really cool. And the game really kind of steps you into that. And the way that you like organize those little orbs, it's like a little disc, and it has like lines between where you pop the orbs. So if you put certain orbs next to each other on the little track, then it will sort of unlock different spells that you can cast and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I was like, this is like, if somebody could translate this into like a tabletop game. So if you had like, the Legend of Heroes Trails series tabletop skirmish game or board game or something, that'd be pretty neat. To kind of play with some of that. The turn order stuff is just great. And the other cool thing is when you look at the turn order, you get little bonuses. And so it will kind of randomly, I think it's random, but it will kind of randomly distribute those. So there'll be like a little crit icon next to a character, either a good character or a bad character, or like a little heal thing. So when that person's turn order comes up, they're getting a crit bonus. You can see it. Or they're going to get healed. So that's the other thing, is if you want to play with the turn order, you're like, oh crap, that devil of a monster who already hits hard, he's going to come into his turn with a crit. I got to be ready for that. So I need to like buff up with some defensive things in the meantime, or try to do something to circumvent, because you can do certain things that will like, again, speed up your character. So if you can see at the bottom, like, oh, okay, the demon blob is going to get a crit, and we don't want that. So I'm going earlier, so I'm a caster. I'm going to give a little buff of a clock up. It's like a clock up, clock down to my melee superstar, and that will get them going, and then they can maybe do an interrupt or something to disrupt something, that kind of stuff. Or again, play with that. So maybe my guy comes in line, and then they get the crit icon and not the monster. And that kind of stuff, or they get the heal and stuff, or you're like, oh, that thing's going to get a heal, so I got to kill it beforehand, so that will pull it out of the turn order list, so the next person in the list, which could be one of my guys, gets the heal. Yeah, anyway, so it's like pretty cool, and you're like, Joel, that sounds really involved. It's not. It like baby steps you big time into all of that, and it's really cool. So it's just a series that I'm like, this story is really cool. It's very like there's a lot of political intrigue and stuff. So I think a lot of those tactical RPGs have that kind of thing, but it's got all that kind of stuff going on. But it doesn't give you, you're not like in it right from the beginning. You're very like low level, sort of, you're in this low level guild almost. I don't want to spoil anything, but you're like, you start off and you're just like, you just come out of training and you're just kind of going around kind of doing jobs for the people in the town, and they're like, hey, there's a monster on the road, right, and go kill it, or I lost my cat, and you're like, oh, that sounds boring. It's fine though. I mean, because you just kind of like slow rolling into this, and you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the world and the politics and like the history and the lore of this place. But it doesn't go over the edge so far into like you're fighting the crazy megalomaniac who wants to be God. I mean, those of you that have played the first two Trails from the Skies, I mean, I'm kind of being loose with words there, but you got to admit, at the end of that, it doesn't really end up like that. Okay. It's very hard to talk about without spoilers. But you've got all that cool stuff, and then you have this really cool, awesome tactical combat, which, like, to me, no Final Fantasy game or any other JRPG I've played holds a friggin' candle to. I'm like, this is the best combat turn-based thing. It's just like playing a tabletop skirmish game. And it's fantastic. I really, really like it. So anyway, I don't know that I'd ever do like a video review of those things or not, but I kind of said everything I said there. But that is the gist of it. And again, please don't spoil anything for the Trails series. I've done a good job of not seeing what's happening, and I don't want anybody else to be spoiled. And Trails fans seem to be on that page, though. They all seem like good folks there. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a different episode. Thanks, everybody. And take care. Thanks.